who side opposition today haven't understood our case and they haven't understood reality. So let me tell you what that reality is. The fact is, as we told you in Kate's speech, that the Kenyan people have moved past what happened in the 2007 elections, or before the elections. They've moved past that stage, and even the victims in that situation are reconciling with the people that attacked them, and that ethnic tension has gone away. That's something you haven't addressed. But more importantly, they haven't understood the reality, and that's that Kenyatta didn't win the 2007 elections. He lost to the party that he actually had conflict with. So what you have to understand is not Kenyatta who's forcing them to vote for him, who's forcing them into his policy. He in fact lost that election, and they're actually establishing a proper democratic system in Kenya where all people have the right to vote and there is equality of both parties. So now, looking at that, let me go and rebut Josh's matter. And the first thing he told us was that it's good for a trial, and the first thing he tried to argue was that a president can still function in the country when he's on trial. And to this I have three responses. Number one, he simply can't. The fact is, if a president's not there because he's not in the country half the time, that really reduces his efficacy as a president. Moreover, a president has other objectives that he has to fulfill other than that. Firstly, is the fact that he has to deal with the reputation of his people. So he's not just there to make policies. He's there to be a figurehead for his people. Exactly. He's there to be an important man. And that's not something he can do when he's being in The Hague half the time. But possibly most importantly, in the international environment, how does a president interact when he's on trial and when his guilt is being accused every single day, and they have to have some sort of international relations with other countries while their president is in that kind of situation? That's something that they're not able to do if he's currently in The Hague. Then they told us that he's completely replaceable, right? Because we could just go down a chain of leads. What we argue there, though, is that just doesn't work with that party. Because the fact is their entire leadership is people you have to trial convict. Either you don't trial them at all, and then you just leave someone who's probably guilty of the same thing if he is guilty in power, in which case you don't fix any of your problems, or you do trial them, and then you take away the core leadership of that party. And the problem there is those are the people they voted for. Those are the people who were leading at the time they voted. And just stating another vote is not something we just randomly do to a country where we feel like it. We can't just force them to take out their president and then suddenly vote for a new one just because we're imposing our views on them. Please. Then he told us that it would be beneficial whether he's guilty or whether he's innocent. And the analysis of when he's guilty is because he's violated his mandate in the past. That's where they misunderstood our team line. What we're here to tell you is that what happened in the past doesn't matter. We don't think he's guilty, but if he is, we simply don't care. He has changed what he's doing for his country. And that's why Kenya is now moving forward. We actually care about the future and don't just get stuck in the past, which is the mentality that allowed South Africa to move past apartheid into the free democracy. That's what Nelson Mandela brought to this country. Secondly, they told us if he's innocent, it clears his name. To which I have two responses. So firstly, if he's innocent, what that does to Kenyan people is they hate the West, who've been trying their leader, who was completely innocent in everything, and they feel imposed in their views. That's when you harm international relations. But secondly, what they do in terms of his innocence is they lose 2 years of him being there for absolutely nothing. 2 years where he should have served as president, and that's incredibly harmful to the country. So then they argued that there's a problem in terms of justice. To which we have to understand that justice is not what the people specifically want. They're trying to reconcile. You still have to respond to that. But secondly, that what we prefer is them to actually feel justice. So when he's actually in the ICC and convicted due to ideals that they don't necessarily believe in or buy into, they don't feel that they're getting justice. They need it to happen locally if they're going to feel any justice at all. Then he argued that putting out was harmful because he's rejecting the validity of their claims. To which we have to understand the reality again. He's not saying that the fact that people died is not harmful, is not a crime. What he's saying is he's not responsible for it, so he's not saying that these deaths aren't wrong or anything like that. Second, in terms of societal cohesion, they just haven't understood the context in which this debate's actually happening when the society is being when the societal cohesion is actually great in the status quo. So now let me move on to my substantive matter. And my first point of analysis for you is why this establishes Kenya as a leader in the African community. So what we have to understand is before the African community was led by 2 countries, namely South Africa and Nigeria, and those were the countries who had all the power in the African Union. Those were the countries who African countries stood behind or polled to. So what happens is when Kenya makes a specific stance and says that we're tired of what the West is doing against Africa, that we're standing for a specific thing of African independence, is they have become a leader. And that shows by the fact that the African Union is considering itself entirely withdrawing from the ICC because they feel that they're being subjected, that they're being unfairly undermined. So what that means is that they're now an African leader. They're a country which other countries are going to follow and ascribe to. So what does that mean for them? So firstly, establishment as a leader is vital, specifically in a community like that, because it means you can further your own aims and policies in terms of polling, right? If they want something to be passed in the African Union, they can get other countries to go up behind it, which directly benefits their own interest and allows them to further that. But secondly, it creates a sense of unity, because these countries are now coming together to fight for a certain cause, and the result of that is those countries are united in other facets. For example, in the East African Development Community, it's very beneficial if those countries are united for them to establish economic unity and political unity as well. Yes, John?
Not only can countries be united other ways, but the kind of countries which supported Kenya were Zimbabwe and Malawi, countries which are universally hated by the global community. Do you believe alliance with these countries is a good thing?
Josh, the fact that the African Union as a whole was willing to withdraw shows there was much more countries than just Zimbabwe and Malawi. But even if we just assume it's those countries, then we think that unity with any countries is good, and that's still a great thing because it benefits that country directly. So now let me go into my second point of substantive matter, and here I'm going to prove to you why it creates greater accountability for international organizations. And what we have to understand is that previously, Africa has just been a puppy dog of international organizations that have been allowed to just ignore the problems that the West and other countries are inflicting on it, and they've only persecuted leaders in Africa. That's why Kenya's made the complaint. That's why they've taken this stand. So what's the result of the actions they've said? They said that we won't just be puppy dogs to your Western views, that you actually have to deal with invasions of America in various countries, that you actually have to deal with the neo-colonialist problems that are happening all over the world, and that African countries are being subjected to by the West and by Asia. So what this means is that Kenya lands up protecting itself in the long term, because they know that as international organizations like the UN, like the ICC, and like the ICJ, that if they don't cater towards Africa and developing countries, then those countries will just pull out of them. And that's what's been seen by the fact that the African Union as a whole is threatening to pull out of the ICC. So the result is that they have to actually go and persecute and prosecute leaders in America, leaders in Asia that are harming African people. So this in the long term is a huge benefit to countries like Kenya. Why? Because it means they're defended from this, that they actually now have a voice in these organizations, because these organizations know that there will be consequences if they just ignore Africa and if they don't prosecute these leaders just based on the fact that they're from hegemons. So what we tell you as side proposition is the fact is we need to look to the future, we need to look to what's best for Kenya. The fact is we need stability, we need Kenya moving forward, and we need international accountability and the end to neo-colonialism, which has been imposed on Africa for far too long. And that's why I'm proud to propose.